everyone, and welcome to our first ever BESEATV interview. Today we've got with us a very special artist with an interesting story to tell. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, nice to see you. My name's HanJie Chow, and I'm a multidisciplinary theater artist based in New York, but I'm in the UK at the moment. So.
Cool. And so uh, I heard that you've been in the UK and Singapore and New York. Can you just explain that journey and maybe how that happened?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Singapore, born and bred till I was 10, and I've been in the UK for about. Then after that, I was in the UK for about 10, 12 years. Went to uni at Bangor University where I studied French and psychology, and sort of did a bit of non-theater stuff up until about 6 years ago when I moved to New York. That was sort of also tied into my undergrad because I was supposed to do a master's degree in acting, which was actually totally different to my French undergrad. So to do a master's in acting, and at that point I didn't really have any training or any foundation or any background in theater at all, actually. And I said to my university, I was like, hey, would you guys be willing to send me to New York for a year, because I know you have like a sister relationship with one of the universities there. And they said, yeah, sure, why not? I actually put forth a really strong case for them to send me there, and they said, sure, like, you're the strongest candidate we have right now. And so they sent me to New York for a year. And after like 3 or 4 months, I was like, oh my God, I can't leave the city, because I just fell in love with New York, and got to know people. And, one of them said to me, you should apply to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. So I had auditioned there. And for went through the whole acting program, and yeah, just sort of ended up just living in New York for 6 years, and then yeah, so now I'm back in the UK for a short while whilst COVID ravages the world.
So which are all three your home? Because like I went to university in Bournemouth
Hmm.
and live and born in Bristol and work here now, and I kind of like consider both my homes. And then Hong Kong I don't go to very often, but when I do, it's like a third home. Like, do you consider all three your homes? Like, how does that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yes, yes. Short answer, I really do. I mean, the last time, well, actually, recently, me and my family just went back to Singapore last September for the first time in like 10 years, which is sort of a huge deal. But yeah, like going back there, like it it is part of me. It is my home. Even though I'm no longer a Singaporean citizen, but yeah, like deep down, that is home for me. And having grown up here in the UK, yes, going through university, I think that's also still very much part of me and my identity. It's still home to me. And New York, where like I went through so many sort of trials and tribulations over there. And yeah, and like I said, like 3 months in, I sort of fell in love with the city, and felt so part of it. And that's where I really grew as a person. Really got to know myself, going through the program and everything, and just living in one of the, I think, like the greatest city in the world. um, yeah, so yes, I definitely do consider all three a home.
Cool. Just to throw it in there, like I have always wanted to visit New York and Singapore, so like maybe if we could keep in touch.
No, definitely, definitely. And it's funny because the first time I went to New York was on vacation, and it was sort of like a 1 2 week thing, and I remember thinking, oh, this would be kind of cool to like live in New York, you know, when you're like loaded and have like tons of money, you know, New York's notoriously is notorious for being really expensive. But then I didn't really imagine or think that I'd be living in New York in my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, actually, this is really doable. It's if you know where to look. I sort of like kind of dived in at the deep end, uh, and yeah, just sort of made it work, and kind of realized it's actually not that out of reach. But yes, definitely, you know, if you ever
So I
choose to.
saw on your website you describe
Mm.
yourself as an actor and a multidisciplinary theatre artist.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the second. Can you like explain it to me and others who don't know what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically, I've labeled myself as a multidisciplinary theater artist because initially, when I first started in theater, like I said, I had no background in it whatsoever, but I knew in the back of my head that I needed some way to sort of distinguish myself from other theater artists or other actors, because I always thought there was this very sort of narrow view of, oh, if you're an actor you can't possibly do anything else, and I wanted to, for myself, educate myself and broaden my horizons. So and I knew I was going to be studying acting. That was, you know, that was a given, but I also knew I needed to make myself more employable as a theater artist. So I interned for a costume department for a theater company in New York, you know, the New York Theater Workshop, and it sort of went just my I continued to educate myself through that, and the ways of theater making, learning about what goes into a production. And then I also used my skills as a photographer, and I became a production photographer for another theater company called Ars Nova, and I collaborated on a few projects with them as well. And yeah, so sort of it was my motivation behind that was just, you know, to really educate myself on what it means to be a theater artist, and how we put on shows.
Cool. So earlier you said you did psychology and what was the other?
French with psychology.
Oh, two subjects actually that I chose
Yeah.
for A level. What made you choose to go to do a master's in acting? Was it?
Um, it was I don't. It was a very, honestly, I always had an interest in theater, but I never really pursued it. And I sort of like one day I was like, yeah, let's just try it, and auditioned for an acting school in London, and yeah, and I got a place there, and I was like, okay, great. But again, you know, I had no, I was terrified because I had no experience whatsoever, and yeah, and decided to go to New York for that. You know,
Wow.
take advantage of um, Bangor University's relationships with other with other universities.
So how did because your family are in the UK, right? How
Hmm.
did they take it? You fly in the nest.
I think they were okay with it. Yeah, you know, they've always sort of just let me do whatever I want, and they know that they wouldn't be able to change my mind. But yeah, so I think they were mostly fine with it.
Did they? What did they think about you like going into acting after you'd studied psychology and French? Was that a shock, or were they like, "Oh no, he's always like that stuff"?
Yeah, the latter. They were always like, oh, he's always sort of like, what, you know. I I think they were, at first they were a little bit like, oh, you're going into the arts, like, okay. Um, but then when I sort of just did it, and you know, didn't really rely on them for anything. they sort of just accepted it over time.
Okay. So what was your favorite things that you've worked on?
Um, in my very first year at acting school, when I interned for the costume department at New York Theatre Workshop, one of the first productions that I worked on was Othello, which starred Daniel Craig and David Oyelowo and Rachel Brosnahan, and just watching them, perform Shakespeare night after night. And whilst I was in my first semester at school, it was like a master class. It was really, really exceptional. So that was one of my one of my sort of highlights at acting school, because it was sort of supplementary to my to my program, and it was something that I like created for myself. And after after that, like throughout my program, I was also a production photographer for Ars Nova, and one of the projects I worked on there was an immersive musical called K-pop. Not sure if you possibly might have heard of that, because it was a huge deal. Like I said, it was immersive. They rented a 4-story building, and that was the whole set for this musical. And it was a really ambitious project. I did some photography for them, which ended up being part of the set. So like basically the premise of the show was that there were these two K-pop groups, and obviously we the creators have to like sell it to the audience that they are K-pop groups. So they needed like photo shoots and everything.
Right.
Those photo shoots and like all these portraits and whatever of these K-pop groups were like all throughout the building. That was part of the set. So that was a really fun project, and that one's slated to go onto Broadway, I think, whenever Broadway reopens. But yeah, so that was a really fun one to be a part of, and to see like the success that it's had.
Yeah, they both sound like really cool experiences. I've
Yeah,
had like an experience of, going with a friend to a show and watching the rehearsal and feeling like that, like so special to kind of see like it before anyone else. And
yeah,
then the whole thing of like, the immersion and being a part of that, like, that I can really like, feel how that could be like, your
yeah.
favorites, definitely.
Yeah, and to have done that whilst I was still going through it through my program, it was honestly, it was such an eye-opening experience to like, again, to in the education of in the process of educating myself on how what goes into a theater production.
Cool. So have you got any projects like you're waiting to start once everything gets back to normal? And have you got like, or any like kind of things you would love to do next if someone's listening and maybe thinking of hiring you?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment that I'm working on a podcast with a friend of mine based in LA, and the focus is going to be on immigrant artists and artists of color, and we're just gonna, yeah, the podcast is just focusing on their work and focusing on them as people, that we as people of color often are sort of like shoved to one side. So yeah, it's just to spotlight artists of color.
So as well as the podcast, what else do you have coming up?
Not frankly, not much else since COVID's ravaging our industry. But one of the things that I wish that I was able to do, and I'm so envious of people who can do this, who can just like spend all this time just like creating stuff. And
Mm,
Taylor Swift just released her second quarantine album. which I'm like, God damn you. So I wish I was just able to continue churning out and creating content, but I know myself as an artist. I know I'm more of an interpreter than a
Mm.
creator. So I'll happily just take someone else's material and like make my own out of it. Also worked on a online theater festival recently as well, Showface Festival. So yeah, just worked on that as well.
What was that like doing online? How have you found it?
It's really, really bizarre. It's really, really bizarre. I mean, like, it's kind of like having to use like my training in on camera technique rather than which I've had less training in on camera technique than actually than theater training, which it's what I went to school for. But yeah, it's really bizarre. It's
Have
really
you got any on-camera tips for us that are new starting up BCTV, or anyone that's getting interviewed in the future and they're watching this back? Have you
oh
got
god.
tips?
It, just
Yeah.
general on camera techniques which I found really useful, is if you're doing like self tapes or whatever, like what I kind of like doing, and what I feel like always kind of reads well is like you're crossing like the eye line from one side to the other. That for some reason that always feels really like um active, I guess. But yeah, so that's one I always like doing, and self taping and on camera stuff. I think lighting is just kind of always key, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually sat on the floor in the kitchen because that's next to the French doors where there's lots of light.
Well, I'm at my parents at the moment, and it's like it's like a really it's kind of like a dark-ish because we've got trees covering everywhere. So I've got like a ring light and everything going. It's a full-on setup over here.
Yeah, I did a music video from home, and I had like, yeah, loads of like lamps and things all from
Yeah.
different directions, trying to get myself lit like it would be professionally.
No,
Um,
for sure. I mean, the only thing that's really annoying me right now is this like little backdrop.
yes, look, oh, you can see my tree shadow there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But like, hopefully our audience isn't as perfectionist as us, and they're okay with it.
Yeah.
So have you just going back to what you were saying about getting to know people, I feel like I know a lot about you as an artist. Is there any kind of hobbies you have or passions you have on the side that people might not know about you?
Yeah, I prior to living in New York, where everything is just sort of like just the cost of living is just taking up my bank account. I used to travel a lot, and I try to travel as much as I can, time and money permitting. So yeah, I travel a lot, take a lot of photos, and I love food. So that's sort of like what motivates me to sort of just get out there and
So what's your favorite place you've been to, or is it still New York?
uh, New, if New York is out of the picture, I favorite place. New Zealand was pretty amazing.
That's one bit I do know. I'm not very well traveled, but I actually have been there because my best friend lives there.
Oh really? Oh, so I went to New Zealand when when I was living out in the French Caribbean for a year. So I was like, oh, the French Caribbean isn't enough, so I just went to New Zealand as well. And yeah, New Zealand, I was out there for a month, and it was beautiful. Like I
Mhm.
hired like a camper van and just drove around everywhere. I mean, I miss it so much. I really want to go back, and it's gorgeous. And after I went to New Zealand, a friend of mine said, "Oh my god, if you love New Zealand, you should go to Iceland as well. Just because they have everything. Landscape wise, they kind of have it's sort of similar. And so I went to Iceland like a few months later, and one of the highlights in Iceland actually was stupidity on my part, that I kind of ended up stuck in the snow, and had to get the search and rescue after me.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I know, right? It was a total sort of like a little twist. But yeah,
If I'd been there, that would probably happen to me because I'm not
yeah,
very.
yeah. I kind of drove the car into like down the sort of like lane that was like snowed in, and before I could turn around, I was like, oh no, I can't turn around because I'm stuck. Yeah, it was really silly. But yeah, no, uh, yeah, like New Zealand and Iceland, beautiful places. Love them, love them.
Have you got any tips for anyone who's uh, listening to your story? It feels like you've just kind of gone for what you wanted, and good things happen. That's
Yeah,
my general gist of your journey so far. And that's not always everyone's journey as a creative. And I wondered if you had any tips for how you've experienced, how you've dealt with things, and what way you've done things, whether you've been able to recognize what it is you do that helps you have a positive journey. Right.
yeah. Yes, definitely. I would say if I would advise, yes, going for what you want, and just sticking to your guns, and not letting um not letting people sort of like say no to you. um I that's one thing I've been very sort of like tenacious, and sort of like go get 'em attitude. um and you know part of the reason why I sort of went wanted to educate myself, and ultimately became this multidisciplinary theater artist, was because I knew that like talent only gets you so far, and being able to sort of broaden my skill set, and learn as much about um, our industry, and who, and knowing the people within the industry, and who you want to work with, and all these theater makers, would be what gets me work.
Mm.
So I think meeting as many people within the industry, and learning about their work, and seeing what you identify with as an artist, sort of helps you learn about yourself, and what kind of work you want to collaborate on or create in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good tip actually, because I don't think not everyone would think about that as being a good way to go about it, but
Yeah,
you can
and
see how it can help.
the the sort of mindset that I've adopted since having been in New York is that everyone in New York is trying to um, make that to create their journey, and to just make it work. And so in New York, it's not beyond the realms of belief to to see someone who is able to put on so many different hats. And they can be an actor, they can be they can also be a director, they can also be a musician, they can also be a writer. It's like kind of everything. And it's sort of, yeah, it's everything. Whereas I feel that, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the UK, it's sort of, you're sort of boxed in a little bit, not by choice, but like if you're an actor, you can't possibly be this other role, like behind the scenes or whatever. I feel like there's just a lesser sense of hustle here than across the pond.
So do you think that's why it suited you being over there, because the way it works there and the way you like to work is similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew going over to New York that I would get more exposure as a minority actor, um, and I have. I've been able, I've been able to get myself in front of casting directors just by working the connections I have, and not necessarily having not necessarily having to have an agent or whatever to rep me. But yeah, generally on the whole, like I've gotten more exposure out there. I've been able to, I was able to, um, practice and refine my craft by being out in New York. Even though I just graduated, not prior to the pandemic, it's I was able to sort of put myself forth for more projects out there.
So do you think then, I forgive me if I've like misinterpreting what you're saying, but so is it easier to get work um, over there than it is here? Because what like being a BC artist, do you
Hmm.
feel the difference here than there?
Hmm. Um, so the kinds of work that I relate to are issues with like culture, identity, and culture, identity, race. That's that sort of work that really resonates with me. Um, and so similarly, the issues of race, culture, identity are very relevant um, in today's times, but they're also themes that are um, more how would you say that are more prevalent in American theater.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So do you think that we might, in the UK things might go that way too eventually?
I've spoken to a few people about this, and I hope it does. Um, and yeah, I hope it does kind of go that way. Obviously, racism in America is sort of more explicit, um, and I think it's it's a little bit more covert and insidious on this side of the pond. Yeah, but what have your experiences been with racism in the industry here?
Um, well, I think the thing that both I and other people have experienced is either you're the wrong kind of Asian for this Asian thing we're doing,
Hmm.
or we've already got an Asian, so we don't need another, thanks. Things like that. Or I think you want. I don't think this space is for you. It's not said as directly as that, but it's implied.
Hmm.
Go over to here. This is your Asian space or world space, and then you go over there. And if you're not doing things that are specifically, for me saying music, that are specifically world music or specifically cultural, and you actually feel you belong in that other space,
Hmm.
and then so then they recognize that and send you back, and you're kind of caught in between two worlds. So that's not always the case, and I've definitely had loads of really positive experiences, as have
Hmm.
others I've worked with. But we definitely have all come together in BCTV because we had experienced a lot of wrong kind of Asian, or we've already got an Asian. Uh, yeah, kind of, without people spelling out.
Right, right.
Or sometimes they literally do spell it out, actually. So yeah, I was interested, and I think the reason why it was great to do you as our first interview is, although we have had some of those experiences, we want to focus on a positive future
Hmm.
and share positive stories,
Hmm.
of which we know there are many, and I think yours is a really positive story. I've been so
Yeah.
glad to have you as our first interview. Hopefully, it recorded fine, and we've actually got it.
Right.
You deserve to.
But actually, going back a little bit to what you just said, I think the issues and obstacles that that we as artists of color always come across is like a sort of a universal one. I think in the U.S. um the, there I have known of occasions where like, oh, they're casting for this mixed role or whatever, and the person of the actor is mixed, but then they're the actor themselves aren't sure uh, if they're mixed enough for the casting team, which is such rubbish. um, so yeah, I mean, like those kinds of issues, I think, are still prevalent in any casting process, which really sucks. But I think in the US, they're just a few steps ahead in terms of um, what inclusive casting or diverse casting.
Yeah, because I know there was a group of us chatting the other day.
Mm,
Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but I mean, I'm not even an actor, and I was frustrated by it, like these experiences that some people are having, which is like, especially if like me, you're mixed race, so maybe that's why I empathized with it more.
mm,
Is that if you're if there's a part that is actually no, it would also count if you're just a British citizen with fully Asian heritage. But that if there's a part cast for, say, someone of Asian heritage, that it would be some kind of a specific role for someone who is Asian and that's related to the story of that character.
mm.
But if there's just a role of like, I don't know, man number two or a named character with a specific role, like unless there's a cultural story behind that character, it seems like from the stories I've heard that it's difficult to get a role as a British East Asian, Southeast Asian who completely identifies with being British. The character is British, but because if you look different, nobody wants. I heard someone say the phrase they didn't want to make the story cultural, or they didn't want to make the character cultural, and to me that like kind of confused me a bit because if you're, I don't know, like me and you, like I don't think it really changes if you,
Right.
the British character, whatever that might be, whether you're just a person crossing the street or you've got like a main speaking role.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, or if this is like I'm even explaining it right because I'm not from that scene and I'm trying to tell a third party story.
Yeah, yeah. I think I know. I think I know what I mean. So basically, if say for example, if I was cast in a role, like does that role does that character um, have anything to do with being Asian,
Yeah,
right? Like, uh, yeah. I mean, I was casted. I was cast in a role last summer for a part that didn't actually specifically say that it was an Asian character. It was just a character.
can I just say that I'm really pleased to hear that.
Yeah,
That's news, and
yeah,
it goes to show again why it was great to have you because I think you've had some really positive experiences, and I think
mm,
it will give a lot of people hope
yeah.
that there is, you know, that there is new and different thinking out there, and that there is opportunities to be had.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, again, but then on the other hand, like me as a person, there are times where I'm like, oh, should I really go for that role? Like, I don't know whether this is gonna fit with that character. So it's like it's kind of like it's my own stuff that that I have to work through. And I think that that's the same for a lot of sort of artists in general that sort of doubt themselves whether they could actually go for that role, or whether they actually fit that role. But what I would also say, and what I would say is that just kind of go for it. Like I you know goes back to again, it goes back to what I said earlier on, and that's just sort of stick to your guns, and yeah, okay, if they don't cast you, like, sure, okay, that's just I try and simplify it for myself a little bit, and don't, and try not to take it personally, because a lot of times, like, the casting process is not personal. Like, I've been on the other side of the table where I've interned for a casting office, and I was like, oh, okay, like, they just passed on this other actor not because of their race. It's just because they're shorter than the other actor that they've already cast. It's really, like, a lot of times it's just, that's just the nature of the casting process, and it's, and I want to believe that the casting process is not personal, and sometimes it's nothing to do with the color of your skin, but then again, other times it is. But I, that's how I try to like make it positive for myself, and not, get bummed out if I'm passed over for someone else. So
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really good example of how you're able to stay positive through experiencing things from the other side and getting involved
yeah,
in all sides of the creative industry that you're in.
yeah,
And I think that's, yeah, I've definitely, because I've helped with community festivals and putting on events as well as being an artist, and I've definitely go, oh yes, now I know what they mean by musicians are annoying, because sometimes you don't write your emails or turn up or confirm, and then they do turn up. So not all musicians are annoying, but like, you suddenly go, oh no, I know, right? You get really frustrated with artists because, or you're concerned about what a musician might do, because
yeah.
actually I've now experienced these things
Yeah.
from the other side, and I think it always helps you. Yeah, I think it's always good to have all different perspectives, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it goes back again to what theater is, which is a collaboration. And if you're just trying to focus on one thing and on your thing, on your job, and have no idea about what's going on with everyone else, like, if I hadn't interned for a costume department, I wouldn't have known how important, like, the wardrobe supervisor is, and they're really, really important. And and all these other roles that all these other behind the scenes roles that goes into, and their efforts into putting on a production. um yeah, and
Sorry, I need to stretch my leg. I don't do anything important while I stretch my leg. I've been sat cross-legged on the floor in the
Oh,
same position. Sorry, I was really trying not to uncross my legs, but
that's really
I've
well,
got
it's still
food
just
all
stuck.
around me.
But yeah, so it just goes back to the this idea of what theater is, and it's a collaboration. So knowing what happens in this thing we call collaboration is, I think, is really important.
Well, I gotta say, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you. Really eye-opening. Some really good tips, I think. I think no matter what you do, actually,
Yeah.
I think that is definitely like transferable knowledge.
Mm.
Absolutely. Um, I really hope, yeah, I hope all of everything you said about your hopes, definitely let's get them all to come true.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, and please do keep in touch. Like when you said you're working on some podcasts or something,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
share them, we'll
I'm
reshare
working.
them.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, for sure.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure talking to you too. Mm.
Just before we go, how does anyone get in touch with you who would like to work with you? Where can they find you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, my, you can just Google me, HanJie Chow. Top Google search result. And my website's there. On Instagram, my handle is Chow Chow Chowie.
How do you spell the E? Like the
Oh, with a Y. So
what?
CHOWCHOWY.